G'day! In this series of videos, we're going to combine our Psychopy and Python programming with Arduino programming and Arduinos and microcontrollers. I'm designing a set of experiments where I want to control the illumination in the arena. I want to basically, at any point, I want to be able to turn 5 or 6 super bright LED lights on, ultra bright LED lights on and off. And I want to be able to control it from my keyboard running Psychopy and Python. I want to control the timing of where we turn them on and off because I want to see what the behavior is. These experiments are approved by animal ethics, and so everything is above board. But what I have to do now is control my experiments. How do I do that? Well, the way that I've come up with it is to use Arduinos, to program an Arduino, to basically just listen out for a signal or a command from the Psychopy, from Python. And at a certain point, the Python is then going to say, hey, Arduino, turn the lights on. And the Arduino is really good as a microcontroller. It's really good at saying, okay, I'll turn this pin on. And so this pin will be activated. And when I activate that pin will be essentially connected to my LED lights. I'm dumbing it down quite a lot, okay, because I'm just getting you an idea of the sorts of things that we are going to do in this series of videos. It will become a little bit more complicated than that, but at this level, that's the sort of thing that we're thinking about. Now, using hardware is not all about just turning lights on and off, but rather, let's say you're doing a water deprivation task and you've got a mouse here. So here's Lionel. If you haven't seen the previous videos, you don't know Lionel. This is Lionel. Here is our friendly mouse. It's about the size of a rat. And let's say we've got a water spout and we're going to measure how many times he, say, pokes his nose into a hole. There's a photodiode there, and we're going to measure the interruption of a photodiode beam. Or we've got a water spout there and we want to measure how many times he goes and licks for water. Okay, so here we can also sample data from transducers, water sensors, or from photodiodes, and that's controlled by the Arduino. And then the Arduino can then send that information back up to Python for saving, or for doing some logic control, or control statements, or for saving that information and doing the timing. So you see, learning how to control the hardware means that you can create more and more complicated experiments, and you can extract more and more information from your paradigm or your behaviors. So if that's the sort of thing that you think you might be interested in, hey, I think this might be a pretty good introduction for you. Now, what are we going to need to do these experiments? So, before we get to that, I just want to say a couple of things. I'm using my Mac to record this, and so my recording and video setup is slightly different to the other video series. Now, the first thing I want to mention is I'm using 2 webcams here. So you've got one here, that's on me, and you've got another one here, that's on my screen here. Yes, I know it's been focusing in and out, this one down here. I'm sorry about that, but hopefully you'll be able to get over that. Anyway, so I'm not quite familiar I haven't quite got it in my head where to look and all that sort of stuff. So hopefully that's not too bad. The other thing that you might be worried about is the colors. You'll see that behind me, I've got the shields down, but it's super bright there. Those leaves should be green. My pants should be navy blue, but they're sort of white. The color balance is a little bit off. That's because I've removed the infrared filters from the 2 webcams here. A lot of my behavioral experiments are done under infrared illumination. Infrared, humans can't see infrared, and neither can mice. And so therefore this is a good way of us basically recording the behavior of an animal, mice, in very low light environments. Okay, we use the infrared light. So that's why the color scheme is a little bit wonky. Okay. I think that's it. First, using that. Yeah, okay. And the webcam. So we'll get there. It's a team effort. So what do we need for these following experiments? Well, firstly, we're going to need Arduino to program an Arduino. So how do we do that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that off. Hey, I did it right the first time. I'll put myself down here and I'll resize that. Oh, no, I'll resize this, he said. Whoop. So you can see here, we're on arduino.cc. So head over here if you don't already have Arduino. And what we want to do is we want to go to software, downloads, and it will basically ask you to download the latest version of the IDE. So this is what we're going to use to program the microcontroller, okay? We're going to go through all the steps of that in the next couple of videos, okay? This step is just getting the software. So you see on the side here, if you're running Windows, grab the Windows installer from XP and on. In this case, I'm running OS X. So I clicked on the Mac OS X, it downloaded, and then I basically installed it from that. And now I have it down in my dock down here. So if we have a look here, we can see it has opened up, and whoop, we make it a bit bigger. And you can see here just what's called a sketch. Relax, we're going to go through what the heck to write in these various parts here. It's a different programming language to Python, but we're going to keep it nice and simple, and hopefully it should be straightforward what you should do. Or it should give you an idea of where to go and how to approach some programming in Arduino. Now, there are some subtle differences if you're going to use if you're going to program on Windows and on Linux and OS X, but I'll go through those when we get to them. It's basically finding out which port which serial port we're going to communicate over. We'll go through that, no worries. Okay, so make sure you've got Arduino. We can minimize this. So it is arduino.cc, okay? The second thing you're going to need, as with all the stuff that we've got here, is Python 3. Okay, so if you are running Linux or OS X, it will come with a version of Python. So here I've got terminal, so I've put terminal in my dock, and here we've opened up a terminal. What we have got is let's see, sorry, I just lost my thought. What have we got? Python. If I just type in Python, it will say, hey, congratulations, you've got Python version 2.7.16. Now, today's date is the 31st of May 2019, and this is a slightly older version of OS X. But the main point that I want to try and get across here is we don't want version 2, we want version 3. So how do we find out if we've got it? If you're running a Windows machine, you will need to download Python. So how do we find out if we've got Python 3? So what I do on this machine is I type in Python 3, and it's going to say, okay, I want to use the Python 3 and that path. And so we can see here, I'm running Python version 3.7.2. And so I can now do all the stuff that I want to do using this. Now that's going to come back with some nonsense, but okay. Make sure you're using Python 3. How do you get Python 3? Well, if we go here to python.org, okay, you can see that there. We go to downloads, okay. It's already come up with the best version for me. So for Mac OS X, it says, hey, do you want to download version 3.7.3, which is the latest one, correct, for today's date. So grab Python 3, because all of our code is going to be written in Python 3. And so if you've got that, then super duper, we've got Arduino software. All right, so let's get that up. Okay, we've got Python running. Now, how do I write my Python programs? Well, I use an editor called Atom. Okay, so again, if you're not familiar with Atom, it's on some of my previous videos. I think the first video series that I got, this is the editor here. Okay, we're going to do all of our Python programming. We're going to write the file in here, and then we're going to use terminal to run that. So that's why we've got this window up and running. But the next thing that we're going to do in this series of videos is we're going to also use the Arduino IDE to program the Arduino, okay? We need to deploy some code onto the Arduino microcontroller, okay? And it's just going to sit there, and then we're going to basically write some code in Python and Psychopy, okay, which will basically use a serial communication to communicate with the code that we've downloaded and deployed onto the Arduino. Sounds a little bit complicated, I know. Trust me, we'll get to there. We'll go through each step individually, okay? So that's the software side of things. Just quickly, what's the hardware side of things? Now, if we have a look here, I'll shift this one back up here. Whoop. Okay, ignore what I've written behind here. This is just some other code that I've got just lying around. Okay, so here, what are we going to use as the microcontroller? So here I've got four examples. So here I've got an Arduino Uno. Okay, so let's focus. There we go. Okay, so you see it's got a USB here. It's got a reset button here. It's got a barrel jack where we can supply power. Normally it's powered via the USB. Okay, so that's okay. When we plug it in, it will be powered up. It's got some little LED lights there, and it's got these black strips of sort of sockets here and here. Which ones are we interested in? Okay, well, we're interested in, if we have a look here, these top ones here. You see how it says digital just here? We're going to use some of these pins here, some digital pins, because we're just going to say, okay, dear Arduino microcontroller, turn this pin here high. And if that turns high, we're then going to turn the LED on, for instance, or we're going to set that pin low. Okay, so it's called a digital write. We'll get into that in the next couple of videos. Okay, so we're interested in these digital pins up the top here. You'll see down here where my finger is some analog in, A0 to A5. Now Arduino can also accept analog voltages. I think it's up to about 5 volts or 10 volts or something. I'd have to check that. Okay, and what it will do is it will accept any voltage up to the reasonable input, and it will undergo what's called an analog digital conversion, and the Arduino will convert it into a digital representation according to the bit depth, okay, or the resolution of the ADC. Don't worry about that too much. We're not going to use these guys. We're going to use these guys up here. But you'll see here as well, there are some other pins called power pins. Okay, GND stands for ground. We're going to use one of those ground pins. You can also get 3.3 and 5 volt out of some of these pins as well. Okay, so that's a Uno, an Arduino Uno, okay? We're not going to use this one because Andrew got a bit excited, and as you can see here, I've written bad analog input. I blew up one of these analog inputs, okay? I could change this chip here. So this is the microcontroller here, but we're not going to do that. I'll put this aside. Here is another one that we're going to use, okay? So it's another Uno, all right? So we can use that. Another one that we could use is basically it's a clone. It's a third-party clone, but it essentially has exactly the same functionality here. You see up the top here, we've got digital, and then in brackets it says PWM. That stands for pulse width modulation, which means some of these pins we can do PWM. Again, don't worry about that too much if you don't know what that means. We're not going to worry about that too much here. Down here we've got the analog input, and we've also got the power pins that we can get access to. All right, reset button. It's got the USB, it's got the barrel jack. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you're using an Arduino one or if you're using a third-party one, it should be okay. There are smaller Arduinos that you can use. So here is a little tiny baby one here. Okay, it's a slightly different chip. Okay, here it's got a reset button. It's got a different USB plug. Again, you can power it using USB. But if you look very closely to this bottom row here, let's see if it will focus. Okay, you see it's got D12 at my finger there, D11, D10, D9. Okay, so D stands for digital. So it also gives us access to digital pins. Up near where my thumb is, up here, it's got some analog pins, and here we've got those power pins. So here, this is a lot smaller form factor to say this big dunder clunker that we have here, okay? We're going to use one of these because we're not worried too much about the size, okay? Be careful if you do get something like this off eBay, because there are some bad clones, typically out of China, and they will not work, okay? So it might pay you to fork out the shekels, for something like this. You're not looking at hundreds and thousands of euros. I'm not sure how much it costs. I think it's, you can get them for as low as 5 or 10 euros, I think. Okay, so that's the hardware. We're also going to look at some other hardware, some other circuitry that I've built in this case. So I've built something like this. There is the LED lights that we're going to use as our output. Don't worry about that if you don't know how to solder or do any of that electronic stuff. We will come to a solution which uses the minimal amount of components. Okay, we just need some LED lights. So if you can get some diodes, some LED diodes, I'll give you a hint of what they look like. Oh, sorry, I just banged my foot. Okay, if you've got a breadboard, great. If not, no worries. Okay, put that there. So here we can see some LED, some diodes here. Okay, some green ones, some blue ones, and some yellow ones. Okay, and you'll notice that there are two different legs there. Got a long leg and a short leg, and that's going to be important, and we'll get into why that's important if you don't know much about electronics. Okay, so get some diodes. I've got some ultra bright diodes here. Okay, get your Arduinos. You will need some resistors as well. Okay, but we're going to be a little bit naughty, and we're not going to use resistors for some of our experiments just to get the proof of principle working, okay? We'll just plug our LED straight into the Arduino. Right, we'll leave this video here. In the next video, we're going to start to program and get control over the Arduino, okay? And I hope to see you in that video, all right? See you then.